All right, let's talk about the devil. I mean, you know the guy. He's probably one of the most famous or infamous figures in all of history, a symbol of pure, absolute evil. But what if I told you that behind the horns, the pitchfork, and all that, there's a backstory that is way more complicated and, honestly, way more fascinating than you think?
Yeah, we all have this image in our heads, right? The red suit, the pointy tail, it's everywhere. But where did that character actually come from? If you trace him all the way back to the very beginning, you find something, well, something totally different. The guy we call the devil isn't really who we think he is. So the real question is, how did this ultimate supervillain even get made?
Well, here's the big reveal. The devil isn't one single character from one single story, not even close. He's more like a composite, a mashup of different figures, different ideas, and, get this, even a few major translation mistakes, all kind of stitched together over thousands of years. So to really get it, we've got to deconstruct him, piece by piece. Okay, so let's rewind. Way back. We're going to start at the very beginning with the original Satan, the one you find in the Hebrew Bible. And I'm telling you, you're probably going to be surprised to hear that his first gig wasn't rebelling against God, it was actually working for him.
You see, in ancient Hebrew, the word Satan wasn't a name, like Bob or Steve. It was a title, a job description. It literally means the accuser or the adversary. This being was basically a member of God's heavenly court. Think of him as one of the divine insiders whose whole job was to go around and test how righteous people really were.
So, and this is the most important part to get, his original role wasn't evil. He was more like a divine agent of justice. Think of him as a heavenly prosecuting attorney. His job was to roam the earth, look for potential trouble, and then bring charges against people in God's courtroom. He was an opponent to us, to humanity, sure, but he wasn't an enemy of God.
The absolute best example of this is in the book of Job. You've got this scene where Satan just shows up in heaven with all the other angels, and God is the one who says, "Hey, have you checked out my guy Job?" Satan's job is to test Job's faith by making his life absolutely miserable. But, and this is the kicker, he only does it after getting direct permission from God. He's totally working within the system.
So, if he started out as God's prosecutor, how in the world did we get to the king of hell? Well, over time, this accuser character started to blend and merge with other stories, other figures, until he became the devil we recognize today.
So there are three main contributors that really built the modern devil. First, you've got the clever serpent from the Garden of Eden. Then, there's a figure who gets the famous name Lucifer, but that's wrapped up in a huge translation mess. And finally, a really powerful female figure who isn't even in the Bible.
Okay, first up, the serpent. Now, in the original Genesis story, it's literally just a talking snake. That's it. There's zero mention of Satan or the devil. It wasn't until centuries later, in books like Revelation, that theologians went back and said, you know that ancient serpent? Yeah, that was the devil. They basically connected the dots after the fact, fusing those two identities into one. And that brings us to maybe the biggest piece of the puzzle and the biggest controversy of all, the name Lucifer. That name is now totally synonymous with the devil, right? But here's the thing. The name doesn't show up in the original Hebrew text. It gets into the story because of a single translation choice that, pretty much by accident, created a brand new character. And this just illustrates the point perfectly. So there's this prophecy in the book of Isaiah, and it's describing the fall of a Babylonian king. The original Hebrew uses the word halel. Now, scholars think this comes from a verb that means to howl or to wail. So the line was probably a taunt, something like, "Man, how you've fallen, you howling one." But when the Bible got translated into Latin, that word, halel, was translated as Lucifer, which means light-bearer or morning star. And just like that, a howling, defeated king was transformed into this beautiful, fallen light-bearer. A whole new myth was born right there in that one translation.
Okay, so the last major piece of this puzzle, this idea of a primordial rebel, doesn't even come from the Bible. It comes from ancient Jewish folklore, and her name is Lilith.
So the legends say that before there was Eve, there was Lilith. She was Adam's first wife, and here's the important part. She was created at the same time as Adam from the very same earth. She wasn't an afterthought made from his rib, she was his equal, right from the very beginning. And that equality, well, that became the source of the world's very first fight.
The story goes that Lilith just refused to be subservient to Adam. When he tried to dominate her, she basically said, "No way," uttered God's secret name, and flew right out of the Garden of Eden.
She was cast out, but she became this incredibly powerful, independent figure, and in folklore, she eventually becomes known as the mother of all demons. Her story created this powerful template for a rebel who chose freedom over paradise.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. We've taken the character apart. We have an accuser, a snake, a mistranslated king, and a rebel from folklore all mashed into one. But when you build such a powerful figure of pure evil, you create a massive philosophical headache.
Think about it. If the devil is this collage of different stories, translation errors, and myths, it all leads to one huge question. If you believe in one all-powerful, all-good God, then having a character like the devil just doesn't quite add up. This powerful, independent force of evil seems to challenge the very nature of God.
And this basically leads you to a fork in the road, theologically speaking. On one side, if God is infinite and all-powerful, he could snap his fingers and destroy the devil instantly. So why doesn't he? Why does he let evil exist? That's the classic problem of evil. But on the other side, if God is in a real fight with the devil, that implies that God isn't all-powerful, that he's limited. It suggests there are two competing gods, which kind of blows up the whole idea of monotheism.
Which brings us right to our final question. After peeling back all these layers of myth and translation and folklore, what are we really left with? Is the devil a literal cosmic enemy out there in the universe? Or is he a powerful and incredibly persistent story, a composite character that we as humans have built over thousands of years to give a face to the darkness we see in the world? And maybe the darkness inside ourselves? That's something to think about.